Good morning, everyone. We welcome to this event sponsored by the International Committee on Nigeria, or ICON, featuring Mr. Bernard-Henri Lévy, a French philosopher, filmmaker, and activist, and the author of over 30 books, including his book, The Will to See. Today, we will see clips from his documentary, The Will to See, based on his book. Selections and his book, I have to note, comes out this week. And if you were here, you could actually find several copies of that book here. So Levy's work as an intellectual and writer is uniquely intertwined with his humanitarian activism. In June of 1992, Lévy convinced French President François Mitterrand to make a surprise journey to Sarajevo. In the wake of the war against the Taliban in 2002, he was appointed by French President Jacques Chirac to head a state mission to Afghanistan. His findings resulted in the book Reports to the French President and Prime Minister on France's Participation in the Reconstruction of Afghanistan. 20 years later, on the eve of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Middle East Institute published that book for the first time in English with a foreword by General David Petraeus. Lévy was instrumental in the intervention by Presidents Nicolas Sarkozy and Barack Obama in order to protect the civilian population in Libya against the dictator Muammar Gaddafi. And he published a firsthand account of his role in this war in the form of a writer's journal, La Guerre sans Lemme, in 2012, and a film, The Oath of Tobruk, which came out in the Cannes Film Festival in 2012. Since 2015, Lévy has been very involved with the Kurds in their fight against ISIS. His documentary film Peshmerga premiered as an official selection of the Cannes Film Festival. He was embedded in 2016 by the Kurdish and Iraqi forces liberating Mosul. Out of this unique experience came another film, The Battle of Mosul, which is the only firsthand account of the fall of the Caliphate's capital. In 2018, following the abandonment of the West after the 2017 Kurdish referendum and the Turkish attack on Afrin, Lévy co-founded a US-based nonprofit organization, Justice for Kurds. Over the course of 2020, he reported from 8 places in the world, like Libya, Afghanistan, Nigeria, and Somalia, where suffering and misery are at a peak, where wars are being waged, where the world's destiny was being determined, and alas, the global community is not paying attention. These reports were published in the Wall Street Journal and in European outlets such as Der Stern, La Repubblica, Espresso, El Español, Catamarini, Nove Vreme, and the Paris Match. Today, we will see clips from his new documentary, The Will to See, which came out in 2020 when Lévy was sent by a group of international newspapers to bear witness and report from countries around the world overcome with suffering and hardship, disrupted by war and the most challenging geopolitical disasters, yet no one seemed to be paying attention. A journey to Nigeria, Syria, and Iraqi Kurdistan, Ukraine, Somalia, Bangladesh, Greece, Libya, and Afghanistan. Lévy's film is an unflinching look at the world's most unreachable hotspots and urgent humanitarian crises throughout the pandemic. With that, I will turn this over to Stephen.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone. And we have 100 of our viewers join us online. We know because of our situation, a lot of people prefer to join programs like this online. So we thank you all for joining us. We are privileged to have Bernard-Henri Lévy today with us. And we thank you guys for availing us the opportunity to use this auditorium, Lantos. We thank you, Piero and Patrick. We appreciate. And today also we have in our midst Professor Bob Destro, former Assistant Secretary of State, DRL. So it is a privilege to have him with us. Now, we would like Bernard Lévy, without much ado, to introduce his book and documentary film, The Will to See.
I'm very happy to be here also in this room, in this place, in this Congress, which is the beating heart of democracy in America. And it's a great privilege for me to hold this small speech from here, from this stage, this room, this table, and with this company. My friends who come back, some of them very recently from Nigeria, which means from hell. Some of them whom I met a few months ago on the ground, who hosted me and my team in their villages or in Abuja in complicated situation. It was like when we met in Abuja, my dear friend, my dear Abdallah, it was like a secret meeting with some passwords. You came with victims coming from all the northern part of Nigeria, each of them coming with his own terrible, disgraced, painful history. And this day we spent in a secret place in the outskirts of Abuja together is unforgettable for me. I will keep the image and the souvenir of this moment in my heart till the end of my life. I must need you to know that. And the fact that you came all this way from Abuja to Washington, D.C. to attend this event and to help your brothers in faith and in combat to organize this event, for me, means a lot also. It means to the world. I thank you, Abdallah, to be there. I thank you, all of you. My book, my film, I will not present my book and I will not present my film. I will do that in newspapers, in TV shows. Today, it is not a book launch. It is more important than that. We are gathering today in presence and for a lot in absence by Zoom in order to speak about Nigeria, in order to put on the agenda of the policymakers and of the lawmakers in America the question of the Christians in Nigeria. I'm not here to publicize my book. I'm not here to publicize a film. I'm here to draw attention of those who have the decision in their hands in Washington, D.C. I want to draw their attention on the case of this suffering, martyrized, maybe genocided, and forgotten people who are the Christians in Nigeria. Honestly, when I started this film and this series of dispatches, of reportage for Wall Street Journal and others, I must confess I knew nothing about the terrible fate and terrible situation of the Christians in Nigeria. I knew nothing. One of yours came to me with some photos, with some informations, and he asked my support. I must tell you that messengers like this gentleman, I receive and I host and I give a meeting to dozens of them all my life. People come, I'm getting old, so people know me now from all over the world, every week, every day sometimes. I receive some messengers of despair and of cursed situation who come with their history and with their demand. This day, when I met this Nigerian gentleman, something happened for me in my mind and in my heart. I felt as if I was called. It was a call. It was a call. I don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe the eloquence of the gentleman who came, maybe the terrible pictures he did show me, maybe, I don't know, something happened in the room where we met, all that is in the film, which worked for me as an imperative. I gathered a little team of movie makers, camera, photographer, and so on, and we went to Nigeria. And I decided this day to break the silence. I decided to attract as much as I could of the attention of the world, or at least of my readers, those who read me, to the case of the Christians in Nigeria. I succeeded in part. My story was published all over the world. It made the head of the news, not only in the Wall Street Journal, not only in Paris Match, by dozens of newspapers all over the world. I start my movie with this martyrdom and this suffering. It is the very beginning of the movie. The Will to See starts with the situation of the Christians in Nigeria. And again, this movie has its destiny. It was a few days ago, I'm just coming from that, in the official selection of the International Film Festival of Roma in Italy. And it was a big success. It attracted a lot of attention. All that is online, you can find it. I think that this film will have, it is a little early to say, but its own destiny in America too. So my aim is to launch these days, and in particular, if you allow me, Mrs. and Mr. Congressman, from this place, and a national campaign and an international campaign, national in America, international beyond America, in order to attract the attention of the world on this silent and forgotten war, which is one of the worst, the most bloody war which is happening nowadays. I think we are going to see a short excerpt of the movie, in particular about Nigeria. Maybe we will exchange after that again a few words. And I do hope that this meeting is not an end, but that it is just a beginning for all of us, and at least I promise for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernard. We are going to watch the film, but after the film, I will bring to this podium Mr. Piero Tosi and Professor Bob Destro to anchor in after the movie presentation. Please, let's watch the film. Thank you.
C'est ici que tout a commencé. Je suis à New York pour défendre la cause des Kurdes et je reçois le message d'un inconnu qui veut m'alerter sur le sort des chrétiens du Nigeria. Des messages de cette sorte, j'en reçois très souvent et je ne compte pas les appels au secours auxquels je n'ai depuis un demi-siècle, hélas, pas pu répondre. Alors est-ce que c'est le hasard? Un reportage lu le matin même sur Boko Haram, le Daesh africain. Ou y avait-il chez mon mystérieux interlocuteur un ton d'urgence qui ne laissait pas le choix? Toujours est-il que je vais au rendez-vous. Le temps a beau passer, j'ai beau tout faire pour m'évader, m'endurcir, je ne m'y résous pas. Et face à ces scènes, face à ces images de ce que l'homme peut faire de pire à l'homme, je réponds comme je l'ai toujours fait. Écrire bien sûr, témoigner sans doute, mais d'abord y aller. Les assassins arrivent généralement de nuit, sur des motos à longue selle, 3 par moto, en hurlant Allah Akbar. Courant vers les cris de terreur, violents, mitraillant, machetant, ils vandalisent tout sur leur passage. Et nous sommes là, un matin de funérailles, dans ce village d'Owereng, état du plateau, ceinture centrale du Nigeria, où le peuple chrétien est descendu des villages alentours. Quittant la cérémonie, joue ma victoire, seul rescapé d'un précédent massacre. Comme elle était enceinte et que l'émir ne voulait pas voir l'éventrement, on lui a juste débité le bras à la machette comme à la boucherie. Ils ont commencé par les doigts, puis la main, puis l'avant-bras, puis le reste du bras, quand le dernier du groupe s'est plaint qu'il n'avait pas eu sa part. Elle vient se recueillir ici, sur la tombe de son mari, tué avec 4 de ses enfants sous ses yeux. Nous apprendrons pendant le tournage de ce film qu'elle a fini machetée à son tour par le rejoindre dans la tombe. Voilà à quoi ressemblent ces tortionnaires. Voilà les gentils bergers Foulani, censés transhumer vers le sud à la recherche de verts pâturages, mais résolus comme Boko Haram à nettoyer le continent de ces chrétiens. Et voilà, face à eux, décidés à défendre leurs terres et à sauver leurs églises, trahis par un État gangréné par l'islamisme, ce petit peuple chrétien qui, oublié du monde, affronte l'une des guerres les plus sanglantes du XXIe siècle. Je me souviens du Rwanda. Je me souviens du Darfour en feu. Je me souviens de John Garang, puis des Monouba. combat affamé par l'armée soudanaise. Je me souviens du Cambodge, où nous étions tous arrivés comme la chouette de Minerve selon Hegel, à la nuit tombée, alors que la guerre était finie et le génocide accompli. Et si, au Nigeria, il en allait autrement? Et si, pour une fois, l'oiseau de la philosophie se levait non plus à la nuit tombée, mais au point du jour, quand la partie n'est pas jouée et que le désastre peut encore être conjuré? Je l'espère. Je le promets.
Thank you. We've watched that beautiful documentary, and at this time, we have Professor Bob Destro here, who is highly informed about this issue globally, issues about human rights violations, and also other consequences that come with it, and how international community can take action about that. And with his privilege, being a former Assistant Secretary of State, he knows a lot about these issues, and he's going to also speak to that issues, and he might ask you some questions. And Piero has been a long time good researcher, somebody who is very, very highly informed when it comes to issues that we are discussing today. I think Piero stands taller than almost everybody I know about that here in this Congress. So yeah, that is my judgment. I may be wrong, but that is my judgment. Because
Maybe you're wrong,
so,
yes.
but
I'll
yeah.
take the compliment.
So now having seen these, let me just start off by asking Bernard, then we'll continue to ride on many other aspects to this. This is a great movie. We started watching it. Thank you so much for risking your life to be there to let the whole world know about this. Now, you don't, I understand you don't use the word genocide flippantly, but in your view, how does the West lack the will to see the initial stages of a genocide in places like Bangladesh, Rwanda, and even from your film, Nigeria? Please.
The West never prevented the genocide. This is the fact. They did not prevent Armenian genocide. They knew, they did not act. They did not prevent the Holocaust, genocide of the Jews, attempt of extermination. They knew, they did not act. They did not prevent the genocide in Darfur. Again, they knew. There was a lot of information, a lot of missions. I remember the late Colin Powell going himself. They did not act. They did not act in Cambodia before, in the 70s. They knew, all the information was there. And they did not act in Rwanda, where all the data were available and nothing will be done. This makes our screening and meeting of today all the more important, because my hope is that for the first time in Nigeria, for the first time in the history of America and of the West, a genocide can be stopped. Massacres happen at this moment and at this very minute on a huge scale, continuously. Every day in these villages where I was, Vereng, and all around, in the area of Jos, in the northern states, you have dozens of dead in terrible situation, in terrible modalities. What I say about Jumai Victor is just one example out of so many. Nigeria is facing a situation which is very close to genocide, edgy. it can go overnight from mass massacre, mass slaughter to genocide. This is precisely what we have to prevent. We have to stop the bloodbath, of course, and also to stop this terrible, evil process which produces and fuels a genocide. I would like that for the first time in 1 century, what the West did not do in Armenia, what he did not do for Holocaust, what he did not do for Darfur, he does it for the Christians in Nigeria. This was my hope, my intention, when I went to Jos. It was my intention when I directed this movie, and it is my intention today when I present it to this place, which is again the beating heart of the American democracy, therefore of the democratic world in general. Let's, in Nigeria, stop the genocide. Let's do what we did not do in Cambodia and in Rwanda. It could be the pride of our generations if we could achieve that. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. and Mr. representatives.
Right, I'll leave it up. We can pick it in bits and pieces, Bob and Piero, so please.
Well, thank you for, I mean, at least from what I've seen so far, it is a very powerful movie. It's very well done. I suppose probably the place for me to start is to pick up on where your movie picks up, which is kind of if I'm translating the French title correctly, it's basically another way to look at this. And the English title, The Will to See. I think that the English title might be a little bit more accurate in the sense that my experience in both the Kurdistan region, where I've done a lot of work, and now in Nigeria and other places, including here, that there is a will not to see. I mean, so it's not how do we get people to see, it's how do we get people to focus, and not in one respect to focus on the victims. I mean, we can never forget the victims, but once again, the excerpt says these are the people who are doing it. Well, I would suggest to you that those are the foot soldiers of the people who were doing it, that there's a much larger control mechanism that gives these people their marching orders. And if my time in the government taught me anything, it is it's that we have to focus on the bad guys. We have to identify them very clearly, and we have to understand that in some respects we are in the middle of an information warfare. That the question of who controls the narrative, your movie is a wonderful piece of the narrative, but it's, and unfortunately, and I've had that conversation with people here on the Hill, is the other narrative is where all the money's coming from, and those motorcycles that 3 people ride on and the weapons that they have don't come from nowhere. And so the question, who's supporting this, that the whole West Africa is the point. It's the target. Yeah, and the question is, how do we figure out who is in that alliance? We know I shouldn't say we know. I mean, so those of us who have looked at it from the inside know that we have to follow the money. We have to look at the money flows and try and understand their geostrategic vision. And we also need to understand very carefully that we're talking about organized crime. This is organized criminal behavior. It has to be treated like organized criminal behavior. I don't care what you call it, whether you call it Islamism, whether you call it communism in Cambodia. You know, these are people who will kill and rape and steal in order to get power. This is all about power. It's all about control. And so the problem, or one of the big problems in the information warfare space, is that the other side has captured the narrative. I mean, so if you think about revolutions, you know, what's the first thing that a revolutionary captures? The answer is the radio station. You know, and that's what they've done. And so the message now is, oh, it's the herdsmen, and they're just poor herdsmen trying to get green space for their cows. You know, the reality is that they're Fulani tribesmen. They're trying to reestablish the Fulani Caliphate. You know, but then when you come up here to the Hill, you'll have young staff members who know nothing about Africa, you know, who will say, isn't it racist to identify the Fulani? And my reaction, is it racist to identify you as French, you know, and my grandparents as being Sicilian? I mean, no. I mean, you know, but the idea that that there is, we have to understand, how do we punch through that narrative? You know, how do we gather the information like you're doing on the ground? You've got the bodies, you know, but what we don't have is the financial map. And what I would love to do is to work with you to try and see if we can't use your work to develop the network, the picture of the network that exists above this. And so we know that the Turks are involved, that the Libyans are involved. As Stephen and I have talked about, we need pictures of the actual slave markets. There's actual slavery going on. You know, how do we get that? I mean, what we need to understand is that this is one piece of a counter response to information warfare. But now we have to figure out what else. You know, and if we can't capture that information space, or at least get equal time in it, there's no way to organize an opposition. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you for that. Just kind of segueing from your remarks, Bob. I'll note that it's not just Hill staffers who don't get it. I mean, I think one of the frustrations that we have is the narrative that the State Department and the inside the Beltway consensus has. And you mentioned, you know, viewing it in terms of farmer-herder conflict driven by climate change, which may be an aspect, but it is not the major issue. And it is important, I think, to identify who are the perpetrators. And in this case, it is Fulani extremists. It is ethno-religious chauvinism, and it is something really that is impacting all Nigerians who are not Fulani. It is the Christians, certainly in the Middle Belt, are targeted, but also Muslims. If you're Yoruba and Muslim, you are targeted as well. If you are Shia Nigerian in Kaduna, you are also targeted. And what's also important, I think, to understand is that the government under President Buhari is dominated by Fulani, and there's been an overall Fulanization of all aspects of the security apparatus of the military and key positions within the Nigerian government, including the Supreme Court, where the Chief Justice a number of years ago, Walter Onegan, was removed and replaced by a Fulani Islamist, essentially. So that dynamic is very important, and there's a certain unwillingness and a blindness and a lack of a will to see what is actually happening. Now, what is interesting, I think what is illustrative, is that if you go back a decade ago, there was similarly a unwillingness on the part of the State Department in particular, but the intelligentsia to identify Boko Haram for what it was, as a terrorist movement. And we can go into nuances. Boko Haram is different. It's Salafist and whatnot. But there was real resistance, particularly under Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, and Johnny Carson when he's Assistant Secretary for Africa, to designate Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization. To give credit where it's due, that changed when John Kerry was Secretary of State and Linda Thomas Greenfield became Assistant Secretary. And Boko Haram was designated a foreign terrorist organization. A positive, and also get into a negative, we now realize that Boko Haram and its offshoots, such as Islamic State West Africa, such as Ansaru, are Islamists with an agenda that they're committed to mass atrocities. And that has become an accepted view, whereas before it was not. It was resisted and fought. The problem here, though, I think, is that now it's very convenient to put all extremism in Nigeria and West Africa, for that matter, more broadly, into the Boko Haram basket and its other affiliated or splinter organizations, and not to address the larger agenda of Fulanization. And it's also, I think there's also a lack of historical knowledge as well. Those that are familiar with the history of Nigeria understand the role that Usman Dan Fodio played in West Africa, going back into the late 18th, early 19th century, and the expansion of the caliphate, the Sultanate of Sokoto in Nigeria. And what's interesting is that the other groups, such as the Kanuri, they were already Muslim. They were then displaced by that. The British imperial expansion checked that, and that, you had this generally, in rough terms, Christians in the south, Muslims in the north, but it's far more divided, as I said earlier. It's not, certainly we don't want to lump all Fulani, but by and large, this is driven by Fulani ethno-religious chauvinism, and it can be directed towards Muslims as well. But it is an agenda that has existed really since the 18th century, and I would encourage those who are unfamiliar to read that history. What is very important, I think, by this film, and also by Mr. Levy's article in the Wall Street Journal last year, is that it does identify the ethno-religious chauvinism as the Fulani as a driver. And it also, and Bob alluded to this, it points to a role by Turkey. That's something that has been ignored, I think. We do know of Turkish arms shipments to West Africa. Turkey is competing with Saudi Arabia for leadership in the Sunni Muslim world. It is something, I think, that has to be examined much more closely. We see Turkey involved in the Horn of Africa, but also in West Africa. And that's another aspect that your article in the Wall Street Journal addressed, but has not received enough attention here. Anyway, with that, I'll turn it back.
Thank you, Pierre. Now, Mr. Levy, this is, you talked yesterday one of our meetings about the Turkey, the NATO, from your experience, and also you even talk about what should be the West, what do I call it, sanction against Buhari, who actually is enabling this terrorism to flourish in Nigeria. But I would like you to see whether you have any experience so far from, you have produced many movies. Do you have any experience that your movie can actually connect with other activities, like what has been said so far, that can move the West to act before it's too late?
There are various ways to act. It's difficult to say like this, and I don't want to go beyond my words. I don't want to be too much optimistic, let's say. Number one, I would like the film to be seen. I would like these voices, which I collected in the movie, the Nigerian voices, the Christian in Nigeria voices, to be heard by the biggest number of people possible. This is the first target. It should go from international film festivals to here, the Hill, to the European parliaments, to the General Assembly of the United Nations. This should be achieved also. This is the first target. Number two, I'm sure that we could get results if the powerful Christian churches in America were more aware. They are well aware of the situation of their sisters and brothers in Middle East, in the plain of Nineveh, of Mosul. They are well aware, and they acted. Maybe not enough. We never act enough, but they did. They mobilized themselves. I think that it should be considered for you as a target to mobilize these American mega churches. And as I said yesterday in front of another audience, I can well imagine the American mega churches rebuild the Nigerian little churches burnt, destroyed, vandalized, desacralized by the Fulani tribe men. It is my dream to see the worshipper of American mega church going in Nigeria with proper protection. This can be fulfilled, it's not very difficult, to rebuild the little village churches which have been methodically destroyed. If I can help for that, I will do in the limits of my time and my means. But this should be a goal. What can I say else? What you said, sir, should be targeted. A white book, un livre blanc, a white book about the massacres in Nigeria. Mainly Christians, sometimes moderate Muslims, sometimes Shia, as you said, but the white book, which is establishing the facts, producing the lists of the killed, identifying the killers, identifying the mechanisms of the killings, how the weapons arrive, and so on. A white book or a black book, call it the way you want, this can be done. If I were me, it would take me 1 year, maybe 6 months to get the information and to have them released. If it were me, I would do that in this time. The list, very important, the list of the victims, because it's horrible to die. It's horrible to die in atrocious conditions. But what is even more terrible and horrible and even more atrocious is to die without a proper grave, without a proper place in the memory of the survivors, without having even a proper number of the deads. This is the summit of genocide. When you don't have the figures, when you don't have the names, when you don't have the graves, it is dying 2 times, So a white book establishing the precise list, name after name. The Jews did that. There is a great gentleman called Serge Klarsfeld. He devoted his life, and another one, a Christian father called Père Patrick Desbois, another Frenchman. Serge Klarsfeld did it on one side, Patrick Desbois did it for the Shoah by bullet, the Holocaust by bullet in Eastern Europe. They devoted their life to establish lists, to name, just the names, and to give to those who were not properly buried a little modest burial in a book or in a plaque, the name inscribed in a monument. This is a way to honor the dead, to give them the burial which they did not have, because a lot of people we saw in the movie, in my movie, they have just their body had just been let to the dogs or to the vultures. So to give them a proper funeral in stone or in paper, and to have the extent of the crime. So I would be favorable to that. My advice, I have not the means and the time to do it myself, but my advice to you would be to undertake this enterprise. White book. Number one, the name of the victims. Number two, what we know about the killers. And number three, what we know about the circuits, about the working of the machinery of death. If you can do that, you will have fulfilled a great deed, and as we the Jews said, a huge mitzvah. If I can help in a way or in another, I will do.
Yes, sir. Before I will leave it, and then audience will take some questions. But now the issue you mentioned something yesterday. What should be the role of the West to Turkey, and also you talked about NATO. Yes. Sanctions.
Buhari and his partners, they will leave power one day. They know that they look at what happened in the rest of the world, what happened to al-Bashir in Sudan, what happened to Milosevic in Serbia. They know that they could end in an international court to respond for their crimes. This is a good argument we have, we, the West. We can go to Buhari and his affiliates. We can send lawyers to them, or we can send news of your lawyers. This is what expects you, what is waiting you when you leave the power. You still have maybe a chance to escape your fate, which is changing politics, stop the killings, expel the Fulanis from inside your administration. It's difficult because even Buhari, but let's say the West has this power, economical sanction and judicial threat.
Yeah, we are not asking,
our two weapons.
We are not asking, you have experience also in, is it in Serbia? You mentioned yesterday how in Serbia, yeah. That US or international community doesn't need to put a boot on ground in Nigeria to make this thing.
The siege of Sarajevo in 1995 was broken by a military intervention, because at this point it was the only way to do, but a light one, implying no boots on the ground and no casualties on the side of the Allies, and also a moral pressure on the killers who ended in lag in the international tribunal. So my experience, that's why I tell you what I told before. My experience is that the moral and the law threat can be the most efficient. Buhari, I'm sure, follows day after day what happens to the Sudanese al-Bashir. day after day, he follows. He's his brother in crime. He knows that if we are numerous to say what we say, to show what we show, maybe to request lawyers. You should, by the way, this is an idea. You should hire some international lawyers. I can advise you if you want. International lawyers of big reputation to make file, to organize criminal pursuit, to go to the tribunal. This is a language which the rulers of Nigeria can understand. This is what my experience tells me.
All right, I leave this time again to Bob Destro and Piero, and we'll come back because we have like 15 minutes, so we will maximize that.
Yeah.
And, yes.
10
please,
minutes?
Yeah. Okay. Please, you want to say anything, ask any question?
Well, no, I think certainly sanctions, and there are a number of sanctioning tools that we have available. Magnitsky sanctions, which are targeted against wrongdoers. So that is certainly a tool. But I think it's the collection and amassing of evidence that's very important. And I would also like to hear from Bob, because I believe when you were there at the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, you did make certain attempts to collect information and to survey things. I guess the question is, you know, what happened with that, and where are we? It is certainly for Congress, and this is where narratives tend to they can be very pernicious. And what we are confronted with now, this overarching narrative that attributes whether it's climate change, farmer-herder conflict, does not really look at the motivations or even take people at their word. Because as you know, when you listen to people and they say what they want to do and what they intend, and also in particular in the languages that they speak. You know, and this is a question: does our State Department have the ability to track statements that are made in Hausa, Fulfulde, or what? Because oftentimes they're very clear. You know, one thing that's I think very important: memory, MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, which is devoted to tracking the press in Arabic and also the Islamist press there, and saying what is being said. There is such an information deficit, and it really is a lack of willingness. I'll give one example too. You know, and I believe it was August of 2001, there was an all Sharia conference in Nigeria where Buhari spoke. He was one of the speakers there. And it is said, and it was reported at the time, that the agenda for a broader Islamization, first the bringing of Sharia into northern Nigeria, but also beyond, was discussed there. If you look at contemporaneous news reports at the time, that was one of the things that was mentioned. However, we lack really a full understanding, and really, again, that lack of willingness, because we should have the capability of, you know, really understanding what was said there. And that would, I think, would help inform policymakers if they were to have that information. You know, interviewing people who attended and getting more information. But unfortunately, there is this, as the film says, you know, the will to see is not always there. So thank you.
Well, again, let me go back to, I think, the excellent points that Mr. Levy made at the beginning, which is we didn't prevent Armenia, the Holocaust, Darfur, Biafra. I mean, you go down the list, boom, 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 boom. And the fact of the matter is they saw it all. They saw it happening in real time. And so you think, well, you know, I mean, there was a point in time when I would say, well, how did they miss the Iranian Revolution? You know, how did they miss the Holocaust? The answer is they didn't miss it at all. They were looking straight at it. and they refuse to do anything about it. And the reason is, and I think this is an occupational hazard, certainly in the State Department, but not just the State Department. You know, there's a word, you know, it's called clientitis. You know, basically you begin to adopt the perspective of the people that you're working with. And you know, the role of the American diplomatic mission in Abuja is to represent the interests of the United States. You know, when I went to Abuja, I didn't feel that that was what they were doing. I felt that they were representing the interest of Buhari's government. You know, and every time we would raise a difficult question, the answer would be, you know, well, that's going to antagonize the government. My reaction is, I don't care. How much money are we spending every year in Nigeria? Well over $900 million a year. You know, and they said, well, if you cut them off, then they'll go buy it from China. Well, my reaction is, okay, so let them go buy it from China. You know, that you have to have a sense of what does a good outcome look like. And they don't have that. More importantly, a good outcome is that they don't like to use the word genocide because that implies action. Okay, now let me flip to the other side. Who would be the actor? You know, you say the West. Well, even in France, you have got an Islamist problem. You know, in Denmark, you know, in England, we had a member of parliament murdered the other day. And the question is, we're looking at real-time atrocities and we're not doing anything about it. We're treating it as if it's we're treating it as if it's a one-off crime. And the fact of the matter is that this is organized criminal behavior, you know, and the problem information-wise is we're going to have, if you say, let's organize the Christian community and let's stop it, the next word you're going to hear is crusade. You know, and my reaction to all of that is, call it whatever you want. This community is not going to stand for it anymore. You know, and you're going to have to get over. It's like, look, are you going to allow people to be attacked? If the answer is yes, then you might as well just put yourself in the handcuffs, you know, or worse. You know, so this question of what do you do, I don't think in some respects, with respect to this issue, there is a West. Because when we look at it, even from the perspective of NATO, NATO doesn't begin to capture what the problem is. I mean, I have a friend who just came back from a Scandinavian country, and you know, and he was talking about the demographics of that country. You know, and when you look at the question, would that country, because of its large Muslim population, would it take a strong stand? I mean, if we have to ask that question, we're way farther behind. You know, so I think we need to understand that we have the normal diplomatic tendency not to want to rock the boat. I mean, I wouldn't want to have been the American diplomat who went in to see Hitler and told him to stop it. And we know from all the histories that they didn't do that. And at the same time, you know, you have this studied ignorance. So when Piero said, yeah, we tried to document it, the only thing, the response I've heard since is, well, all they were trying to do is give money to the Christians. That, you know, that's the received wisdom on the ground in the State Department. It had nothing to do with giving money to Christians, but in the State Department, giving money is the primary tool of foreign policy. That's why sanctions and other things are useful. But you know, we have to understand that money is the lingua franca. And unless we start to move to shut it off, then we're not going anywhere.
Thank you, sir. I'll take the question, then you, Ms. Levy, you give the closing remark after that question. One question? Yes.
Assistant Secretary Destro used the term organized crime, and Mr. Levy, you used the term machinery, and Stephen brought up NATO. As a retired Army officer, I've got great concerns about NATO's facilitating Turkey, the Republic of Turkey in its present form, as perhaps the greatest net exporter of genocide in the 21st century. And here we have evidence of it in Nigeria. And so when we talk about the West, I think NATO. And I saw NATO act in I4, and I was part of K4 in Kosovo. So we can put boots on the ground, but how would, what's your perspective, Mr. Levy, on the issues that are facilitating Turkey's ability to help propagate genocide in Nigeria and other parts of the world?
I can tell you what I saw again, what I was witness of in the areas where I was, in Jos, in Godo, in other parts of this area of Nigeria. I saw a strong Turkish presence. I saw some madrasas were financed and inspired by Turks, for example, and not only one. So I should, of course, one should investigate much further. These impressions which I have should transform into informations and well calibrated, but I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
The few days I spent there gave me this evidence. But again, I think that if someone decides to endorse it, the two little ideas we suggested here might be useful. A white book and recruit a team of international lawyers to document the white book, to document the crimes and the victim, and to give a memorial to the victims, and the team of international lawyers in order to transform that into a possible indictment of those perpetrators. Believe me, things will begin to shift a little if only you announce that. Use my film for that, it's yours. It belongs to the victims, and it belongs to the survivors. It belongs to the film, to Joumaï Victor, the lady whose arm was butchered and who was killed, and it belongs to those who survived the massacre of Joumaï Victor. So use my film for that, but my advice, team of lawyers, white book.
Yeah, one point also on the Turkish connection, which has not been looked at. I mean, people look at flow of funds from the Gulf, and which should be looked at too. But there is a telephone recording, which I believe has been verified, of a Turkish Airlines official talking to someone close to Erdogan and the Erdogan government, talking about arms shipments destined for West Africa. And the question was, well, what are they going to be used for? And the assurances, will they be used against Christians? That's something that has not been sufficiently explored, and I believe it has been corroborated, but it does deserve to be acted upon, because you have there two individuals in this phone conversation, and that needs to be explored in a way.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting us. We appreciate.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll follow up and then we'll circulate the record. Thank you.
So thank you for I think something can start today,
Yes.
hopefully.
French Embassy this evening for,
Yeah,
there will be filming there.
the film will be screened